Hello all, welcome to my YouTube channel. So in today's video we are going to discuss about Ingress and Ingress Controller, which we generally use in Kubernetes, and we will also see how we can set up a Nginx Ingress Controller in AKS. So let's start. So let's understand what is Ingress. So Ingress is a Kubernetes resource that manages external access to services within a Kubernetes cluster. So basically Ingress is a, I would say Ingress is a plan under which we define what needs to be done. And Ingress controller basically perform or execute the task whatever we define inside the Ingress. So if we only specify Ingress, then there is no use of Ingress resources. So for to run Ingress or to execute the task which we define inside the Ingress, we need a Ingress controller. So in simple words, Ingress basically help us to route the traffic, whatever the traffic is coming from outside the cluster to the particular app based on certain rules. So basically, in simple word, it is act as an entry point for external user to interact with the services running inside the cluster. So if you can see in this particular diagram, the client is requesting to access particular pod or application which is running inside your AKS cluster. Then here we can see a ingress controller. So it could be a Nginx ingress controller, application gateway ingress controller. So there are many ingress controller in market. So based on your need you can choose, and all the ingress controller has different functionality from each other. So in Kubernetes cluster, basically we are defining the ingress resources. So under ingresses, we define a routing rules. Based on the routing rules, the traffic goes to the particular pod or particular services, whatever we define in the ingress resources. So in simple word, ingress, without ingress, there is no use of ingress controller, and without ingress controller, there is no use of ingress resources. So let's understand the feature of ingresses. So the very first feature is URL path routing. So route traffic to the different services based on the URL path. So suppose for example, I have a domain called abc.com. Now the same domain, if we have used in multiple application or services, so we can do a pathways routing, like we can define abc.com/API, abc.com/services, abc.com/support. So like that, we can use a single domain or single IP, and we can route the traffic to the multiple services. So that is called a URL path-based routing. And another one, we have a host-based routing. So basically here the routing, whatever the traffic is coming from the ingress controller, it basically route based on the host name. And third feature is the TLS and SSL termination. So if you want to use a HTTPS or SSL certificate to secure your application, you can utilize this feature as well. The fourth one is load balancing. So distribute incoming requests among backend pods of a service. And fifth rule, custom rules. So if you want to do some kind of advanced level routing which basically it supports, then you can do that thing also, like you rewrite URLs or redirect traffic to particular pod or service, like based on your requirement you can define custom rule as well. So these are the few features of ingress. Now let's move to a ingress controller. So basically ingress controller act as a traffic manager in Kubernetes cluster. It is just a piece of software basically that do a routing for you, whatever resources or whatever the rules you have defined inside your ingress resources. So based on your rules, it route the traffic from external to the internal application. It could be a pod or service. So think of in this way, like ingress resources is a plan that says traffic coming to this particular app and where it should go, and the ingress controller is a worker which basically read the plan from the ingress resources and actually do the task whatever we have defined in the ingress resources. So basically ingress resources and ingress controller both are dependent on each other. Without anyone, nothing will work. So there are some popular ingress controller which is available in market. So the very first thing is Nginx Ingress Controller, which we are going to set up in AKS in today video. Another is traffic. Another one is HA proxy. If you are using AWS, then we have a ALV Ingress Controller. And similarly, if you are using Azure, we have a Azure Application Gateway Ingress Controller as well. So based on your need or based on your requirement, and you can choose whatever suits for you. Now, how we can install the Nginx Ingress Controller in AKS. So these are the commands. Basically, the very first thing you need, if you are using your local system, definitely you need to install a Helm. It's a exe file which you have to save in particular location, and that path you have to define in your advanced settings of your system. And then you have to run these three commands basically. So the very first command is helm repo add ingress hyphen nginx, and this is the GitHub repo URL where we will basically download the repo in our local. So this help us to get the code or get the ingress resources which or ingress controller resources which we have to release. The second command is helm repo update. So suppose you have downloaded this, add this repo in your system, and maybe there are some changes or there may be some updates, then you can run this command helm repo update. So whatever the latest changes makes on this particular repo, it will fetch in your system. Now the main command is this particular command. So the command is helm install nginx-ingress, and this is ingress-nginx slash ingress-nginx and hyphen namespace. So we are defining here like under which namespace we want this particular nginx ingress controller to be installed. So if you want, you can customize this particular namespace name as well. And the main important part on this particular command, if you can see these flags set hyphen set. So I have set up here two flags. The very one is hyphen set controller dot service dot annotation dot service dot beta slash dot to kubernetes slash dot io and slash azure load balancer or something. So basically this is the main flag which you have to set up during the installation of AKS controller. And the another flag is traffic policy, controller.service.external traffic policy equal to local. So this is optional, but it is recommended if you want to use. Otherwise, this is the main flag which you have to set. Without this, your Nginx Ingress Controller will not work. So let's understand what this particular flag will work basically. What's the use of this particular flag which we are using here, or annotation we can say. So this particular annotation which we have used, the hyphen health jet, is crucial when deploying the Nginx Ingress Controller and on AKS, because it ensures the proper integration between Kubernetes services and your Azure Load Balancer. Because Azure Load Balancer continuously check the health of backend services to route the traffic. So it basically route always traffic on a healthy nodes or healthy pods basically. So this is basically a very important annotation which you have to use in your AKS cluster while you are installing the Nginx Ingress Controller. Without this, it could be your Nginx Ingress Controller won't work. And another one, the set controller.service.external traffic policy equal to local. So this basically used to prevent the client's source IP for logging or routing purpose. So this is optional. If you want, you can install. Otherwise, this is the mandatory which you have to set up during the installation of Nginx Ingress Controller. So now let's move to the demo. We will create a AKS cluster, and then we will install Nginx Ingress Controller, and then we will do a deployment of a sample app. So let me go to my Azure cloud. So here I will go to the Kubernetes services. I will create a very basic Kubernetes cluster. So here I will choose my resource group, which is demo, and the cluster preset configuration I'll choose dev and test, but it is not recommended if you are using production level work or real-time scenario. So this is a demo, that's why I'm using this particular configuration. And cluster name, I'll choose to give here demo AKS. I'll choose my region Central India, that is fine. I don't want any availability shown. And pricing tier is also, I will keep a free one. Now in node pool, I'll change the image size. So here let me select. So I'll go with D2SB3. And here also node count, I will choose 1 and maximum 2. And let me update this. Now I'll go to networking. So here I will keep everything default. And Azure Container Registry. So here I will use my container registries because I have a Docker image on this particular container registry. And I don't want any monitoring. So let me unselect these options. And securities also I will keep default. And now let me hit and review and create. So you can see validation is passed. Let me hit on create now. So it will take a couple of minutes to create a Kubernetes cluster. Meantime, I'll pause the video. Once the cluster deployment will be successful, I'll resume back. Meantime, this deployment is in progress. Let me quickly show you the ML deployment file, deployment.ml file and service.ml file. What we are going to do. So let me move my Visual Studio Code here. So the very first file I have here, deployment.ml file. So here basically I'm doing a deployment of my application. So this is very a basic deployment.ml file. I will also add this particular repo link in description box. So if you want to do your hands-on, you can do that. You just have to change your image name here. Rest all the things you can keep default. So in deployment.ml file, the very first thing which is required API version. Then second is kind, and the third is metadata, and the specification, what all the things you want in your pod. So you can see a very basic deployment.ml file here I'm using. And the main game is here a selector, if you can see. So if you can see the selector in deployment.ml file, actually I have added two files here. This part is for the deployment, and if you want, you can keep multiple files in a same file as well. You have to just put three hyphens here, and you can start creating a new files. So basically it is something called a breaking point, and it will assume like from after this particular slashes hyphens there are the new file will start. So two replicas I have chosen here. Selectors, I have chosen a match label, like this is very important. So in Ingress, basically the selectors roles are basically very important, because when we install a Nginx Ingress Controller, Nginx Controller, we will point to backend to this particular service, and this particular service is connected to your this particular deployment. So whenever any users or any traffic will come your Nginx cluster, the configuration which we will specify in ingress.ml file, that basically look for the backend of this particular service. And this deployment is basically linked to this particular service. So this is something called from ingress to service, from service to deployment. That's how basically traffic will flow. So here a service type, I'm using cluster IP because I don't want any public IP address and all. And if you want, you can use a load balancer and node port as well. But for a demo purpose, it is fine cluster IP. Otherwise, I would recommend, if you want to use, you can use node port or load balancer as well if you want to test your application. So this is very simple deployment.ml file. And another one here, we have a ingress.ml file. So this is what we are defining here. API version, which is mandatory. Again, what kind of ingress you want to create. So ingress, metadata, and annotation. I'm using here this one. And if you come to the specification part, so this is the basically ingress rules we have defined here. So the rule which we have defined here, we want to traffic to come to, if whatever the traffic comes from this particular host, which is www.myappblue.xyz, this whatever the traffic will hit on this particular URL, it will redirect to the AppBlue service. So AppBlue service is the service.ml file which we are using here. So traffic from Ingress, the traffic will come to the service, and from service your traffic will reach to the actual pod where your application is running. So this is also a very simple Ingress file. If you want any like multiple host, if you want to add, then you can also again keep this particular path. You can again add another host here, and you can choose any other services if you have. And these are the commands basically which we are going to run while we install the Helm, Nginx Ingress Controller. So I have already explained in the slides. And the third one, we have a namespace. So here we have a two namespace basically. So actually we don't need this particular namespace. So let me delete it. We will create only one namespace where we will do a deployment of our application. So let me close this one as well. I will keep all these file in a GitHub and share the repo link in description box. So let me check. Okay, so deployment is completed. Let me go to resources. So the very first thing what I will do, I will connect to my cluster through Azure CLI. So I will choose here Azure CLI, and I will open my terminal here. So it's loading. So the very first command, we have to log into the log into the Azure account to authorize myself. So let me do that. So basically it will go and open the browser, and it will ask for the which account you want to log in. So I will choose here my account, and you can see you have logged into the Microsoft Azure. So let me close it. Once you logged in, you can see subscription details, lot of details. So you can see if we are getting this particular thing, it means you have successfully logged into the Azure account. So let me clear the screen. Now the next command, which is download the cluster credential, which is used to connect to the AKS cluster. As of now, we have only authenticate to ourselves to the Azure cloud. Now we will download the cluster credential, which we will use to connect to the AKS. So let me run it. Okay, so this is also completed. Now what we will do, we will do a deployment. So I will type the command kubectl apply -f, and the file name is deployment.ml. Let me run it. Okay, so we are creating a deployment ml namespace blue not found. Okay, so actually if you can see in deployment.ml file, we have specified namespace below. So the very first thing, we have to create a namespace. So let me run the command again, kubectl apply -f, and the namespace file name. So this is okay, this is completed. Now I will rerun my deployment.ml file. You can see deployment and services both are created. Let me clear the screen. kubectl get pods and hyphen namespace, which is name is blue. So you can see I have two pods because in replicas I have defined two. So both the pods are running fine. Now we will check the service as well. kubectl get service hyphen namespace, which is blue. Okay. So you can see in cluster IP we don't get any external IP address. If you want to test your application with the IP address, then you have to use node-port or load balancer service. Okay, so let me clear it. Now the next thing what I will do, I will install the Helm. So Helm actually I have already installed. I will install the Nginx Ingress Controller. So now I will run Helm repo update if is there any latest changes or something. So update completed. Now instead of using, actually if you by default if you have installed this particular sorry, if you have already installed the Nginx Ingress Controller, and if you want to upgrade, or basically you have not set up the flags for health chat, then you can upgrade also. So let me do this way only, and we will see if without this if your Nginx Ingress Controller will work or not. So for now I'll just create the Ingress Controller, and we will see without that particular annotation your Nginx Controller is working or not. So let me run it. Okay, so Nginx controller is installed successfully. Now what I will do next, I will take the public IP address of my Nginx Ingress controller, because this is required when I will use a host name or a domain name in my ingress.ml file. Then I have to map in my cloud domain provider. So let me get it. kubectl get service hyphen namespace, which is in our case ingress hyphen nginx. So this is the public IP addresses which I will point in my GoDaddy, which is my cloud provider, sorry, domain provider. So let me copy it. Now what I will do, I will go to my GoDaddy account. Okay, so here I will go to my product, and here I will choose my domain which we have specified in the ingress. So here I will go to DNS. Now here what I will do, I will add a record. So let me delete the existing one. I will add a new a record here, and here I will put at the rate, and here we have to define the IP address of our Nginx Ingress Controller, and time TTL I will set 600, which is minimum. Let me save it. Okay. So now I'll go back to my Visual Studio Code. So now we have to run this ingress.ml file where we have specified our domain name or host name. So let me run it. kubectl apply -f ingress.ml file. So the ingress has been created. So we have set up a DNS now only, so it will take some time to propagate your DNS name. So let me search it here if it's working or not. So you can see the site can't be reached. Let me do a NS lookup. We will see if our domain name is resolving the IP address of Nginx Ingress Controller. So we will search NS lookup, and we will provide the domain name, which is myappblue.xyz. So here I will remove HTTP also. So you can see it's not resolved yet. Let me rerun it. So it will take couple of minutes. Again, it's based on your domain provider. Okay, let me remove the www as well, because the domain name is myappblue.xyz. So you can see we get the IP address of our Nginx Ingress Controller. There are still some timeout, but it's fine. So let me refresh it again. So still you can see a DNS problem. So here I will remove the www and I will search HTTP. So basically in background the ingress controller is looking a health, like which healthy pod we have to go, but it's not able to identify. So now what we will do, I'll go back to my Visual Studio Code and I'll go to my this particular file. Now I will run, or basically I will set the annotation. Okay, so it's completed. We can see a lot of information here. Now what I will do, I'll go back to my site and let me refresh it again. So let's wait couple of minutes, because sometime DNS changes will take time. So we'll wait at least 5 to 10 minutes. So now you can see after waiting 5 minutes, we get our sample app which we have deployed. So and this is coming from the Ingress controller. This is the URL which we have mapped in our DNS record. So that's how basically we set up a Nginx Ingress Controller in AKS. This is not a secured one because we have not installed any SSL. So in best practice, you have to use a SSL certificate for your application. So I hope it's clear. That's all for today. See you next video. Thank you so much.